call Peter Hain.
Thank you very much, Dr. McRae. Can I welcome your Celtic insight into this debate affecting a Celtic neighbour? And can I apologise to you and to both front benches if I have to be out of the chamber at the time of the wind-ups. I wish to speak on Clause 2, Stand Part, a clause which reverses the ban on dual candidature which this House legislated for in 2006. During the second reading, Dr. McRae, I provided detailed evidence about the widespread abuses of the dual candidacy system in Wales, which led it to being banned under the 2006 Government of Wales Act, which I introduced. None of this evidence was disputed or rebutted by the government or any other party. I readily confess to being one of the Welsh ministers who, prior to devolution, took the original 1998 Government of Wales Bill through Parliament, which permitted dual candidature. But I never for one moment imagined the abuses that it would produce and the antipathy that it would create. Voters never understood that it was widespread practice since the establishment of the Assembly in 1999 up until 2007, when it was banned, for candidates rejected by a particular constituency to then secure backdoor election as Assembly members through the regional list, and were then able even to claim to represent the very constituency that had rejected them.
Absolutely.
After reading the government's proposals for repealing the ban on dual candidacy, I've searched in vain for substantial arguments beyond cries of political partisanship. The truth is that the ban has affected all candidates of all parties by preventing each one from having a two-way bet with voters. The ban simply puts voters in charge by ensuring that if they defeat a candidate in the constituency vote, that candidate does not get elected in defiance of the popular will. At a time when the political class, when all of us, are held in lower repute than at any time in the history of British democracy, the very idea that the government are proceeding to ensure election losers become winners is absolutely extraordinary. It holds the electorate in utter contempt. So let's examine the case advanced by ministers. First, the government has used evidence borrowed heavily from the Scottish elections, which is similar to ours in Wales, and manipulated evidence from the Arbuthnot report to support their case. Ministers claimed in the Green Paper that the Arbuthnot report on the situation in Scotland found no justification for the argument that public dissatisfaction with dual candidacy had a negative impact on voter turnout. They also used evidence from the Electoral Commission's poll position report done in 2006, which focused on voting in the National Assembly elections. Clearly, however, the government chose only to reflect the contents of these reports selectively. In fact, the Arbuthnot report quoted the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey of 2003, which found a high degree of opposition to party control of candidates on their regional election lists. Moreover, opposition to party control of the list was particularly acute, and this is the important point, due to public confusion with the system, exacerbated when regional members of the Scottish Parliament appeared to get in through the back door, having been defeated as constituency candidates. In the 2003 Scottish election Arbuthnot reports, the public was indeed concerned that 88% of the regional MSPs elected had fought and lost in constituencies. The closed list system was seen to have undermined the election result in these scenarios, as it raised questions of legitimacy for regional MSPs in voters' minds. The Electoral Commission poll position report on voting in Wales from 2006 clearly demonstrated that over half of the Welsh population, 56.7% to be exact, opposed the closed list system, which is still in place. Added to this, over 60% of the electorate preferred to be represented by just one Assembly member. In fact, the Arbuthnot report confronted exactly the same problems that I faced as Secretary of State, namely how do we limit the tension between AMs and MSPs, which is created by having constituency and regional lists where losers become winners, and how do we reduce abuses of dual candidacy. In Scotland, the Arbuthnot report suggested two measures to remedy the problems mentioned. The most significant was to clearly identify the differences between regional and constituency members in legislation, with a clear code of conduct for MSPs. That's not being proposed under this bill. The Arbuthnot report argued that regional MSPs should not make misrepresentations to specific constituencies, and there would be a tacit understanding between constituency and regional MSPs that a constituency matter was one for the constituency MSP alone. This effectively created a quasi-second tier for regional members within the Scottish Parliament because they had no remit to meddle with constituency matters, something we do not have in Wales, and this bill is not suggesting. That was then reinforced throughout Scotland with an educational campaign to highlight the subtle and important differences between regional and constituency representatives. Now, the government may refer to Clause 36 in the Government of Wales Act 2006, designed to protect the public from confusing the constituency and regional AMs, and it states, the standing orders must include provision about or for the making of a code of protocol about the different roles and responsibilities of Assembly constituency members and Assembly regional members, and Assembly constituency members must not describe themselves in a manner which suggests that they are Assembly regional members, and Assembly regional members must not describe themselves in a manner which suggests that they are Assembly constituency members. In 2006, I legislated for the introduction of these standing orders, but there's still an endemic problem. Time and again, the result of this has been regional members cherry-picking which matters they get involved in with clearly partisan motives, and leaving constituency members with either the leftovers or vital but burdensome daily process of casework and individual representation, which is their proper responsibility. A clear example of this occurred in South West Wales, the region recently, where one regional assembly member tried to claim leadership of the campaign for the Vistian pensioners when this was not a devolved issue and was being addressed and indeed was finally resolved by a cross-party group of members of this House. This means in practice that a regional assembly member or MSP who has lost a constituency vote can, from the position of a regional assembly member, work within a constituency and effectively run a 4 or 5 year election campaign focusing upon higher profile public campaigning and generating publicity while never having to confront the tough issues of daily representation by passing the buck on those to the constituency member. I turn the attention of the House to comments made by former Liberal Party leader and Scottish Parliament presiding officer Baron Steele of Akewood, who said in 2003, and I quote, "My second reason for having second thoughts about the list system is that it led to unnecessary tension between some list members and constituency members and others. Quite the most distasteful and irritating part of my job as presiding officer was dealing with complaints against list members' behaviour from constituency MSPs, Westminster MPs and local authorities. Most did their best to obey the code of conduct, but there were a few serial offenders whose behaviour was referred to the Standards Committee. I could not understand at first why we had such problems until it dawned on me that what some were determined to do was misuse their position to run a permanent 4-year campaign as candidate for a particular constituency. In most parliaments, you do not have members sitting in the same chamber or in committees who are going to be election opponents, and it does not make for a good working atmosphere. My third objection, I'm still quoting Lord Steele, my third objection to the system as it operated, has operated, is that it's led to confusing and expensive proliferation of parliamentary offices throughout the country. In at least one town, there are 4. This arose because of an agreement between the parties that regional list members as well as constituency ones should have publicly funded offices. Of course, this operates in Wales too. Back to quoting him. I registered my objection at the time because they become a thinly disguised subsidy from the taxpayer for the local party machines and added to the tendency I've just described. In my view, they are a serious waste of public money, and I do not exclude my own former regional office from that stricture. That's an independent observation from a former Speaker of the Scottish Parliament. The fact that, nevertheless, I would like to make a bit more progress because he was very generous in taking interventions, but his contribution lasted 40 minutes. I would prefer to be a bit briefer, and I normally am very generous. The fact that, nevertheless, Scotland has retained dual candidature in defiance of Lord Steele's advice is no reason for Wales to do the same. The government simply will not acknowledge the fundamental democratic abuse of dual candidacy, which is that losers become winners, that voters are second-guessed and contradicted by the system, their choices denied. The second significant measure which the Scottish Parliament adopted after Arbuthnot tried to increase the accountability of regional MSPs to the electorate by changing its voting system and introducing an open list for regional candidates, not something this bill provides, providing some measure of control for Scottish voters. They did this because the Scottish Social Attitudes Survey 2003 found a high degree of opposition to party control inherent in the list system. Voters in Wales enjoy no such privilege, and the government is not proposing to give it to us. Therefore, on the issue of dual candidacy, two different paths were followed. In Scotland, it was through greater clarification of the roles of members and by turning to open lists. In Wales, we felt that the ban was the right solution to dual candidacy abuse. Nearly a decade on from the Government of Wales Act, I feel that we made the right choice, but much more must be done to give regional AMs more accountability to the electorate. On candidacy, this bill does nothing to further the evolution of Welsh democracy. Indeed, it puts it into reverse. Over the past 15 years, the Scottish Parliament and Welsh Assembly have both evolved in different ways to better suit the needs of their individual electorates. As the government's proposal currently stands, we'll return to some of the same absurd anomalies we saw in 1999 and 2003. In the case of Clwyd West in 2003, already referred to, every one of the three losing party candidates nevertheless won. Now consider these cases from the 1999 elections. In 1999, 17 out of the 20 regional assembly members elected lost constituency elections. Thus, over 3/4 of the regional assembly members did not have a democratic mandate to represent people. Voters had not voted for them. And 15 of these 20 had offices in the constituencies they'd failed to get elected in. In the Conway constituency, the Liberal Democrat AM, Christine Humphreys, came fourth in the popular vote. She had less than 10% of the vote in Conway, yet still became an Assembly member for the North Wales region. In Wrexham, the Plaid Assembly member Janet Ryder came last in the constituency with 2,659 votes. The constituency Assembly member had 9,239, and yet Mrs. Ryder still became an Assembly member through the back door. In Ernest Mon, the Tory Assembly member Peter Rogers won 6,031 votes, third on the constituency list. The Plaid Cymru Assembly member who won a majority had over 16,000 votes, and still Peter Rogers became an Assembly member for the North Wales region. It's not a partisan argument, but simply a truth to state these results are fundamentally undemocratic. In the North Wales region during the 1999 election, over 215,000 voted. Were you to take a look at every individual ran as a constituency candidate in that election and collated their votes together, Christine Humphreys, Janet Ryder and Peter Rogers polled less than 6% of the total regional vote, and yet they still became Assembly members for that very same region. After two Assembly elections where this was a regular occurrence, where in 2006 almost half the population said they did not understand how their electoral system worked, we sought to remedy confusion over how Assembly members could still get in through the back door. The ban on dual candidature was the right choice then, and I believe it remains the right choice now. We introduced the ban in 2006 to stop these anomalies and the confusion they produced in voters' minds. Now the government is proposing to start this all over again. In 2006, and mention has been made of this study, Victoria Winkler, director of the Bevan Foundation, conducted a survey which found a broad support for the ban on dual candidacy. Her report also highlighted the need for greater education and understanding among the general public. This report qualified the findings of previous research into dual candidacy. It said that none of it had been sufficient to make a substantial case on whether or not the public were for or against it in elections, but that they did discover a considerable public disquiet on the issue with broad support in favour of the ban. Yes, of course.
To the right honourable gentleman for giving way. Can he explain, therefore, if dual candidacy is so objectionable to his party, why, when they were in power here in Westminster till 2010, They didn't ban it in Scotland, didn't either ban it for the Assembly in London.
Explain.
I've already dealt with that matter, but can I just correct him on this? It's not objectionable to my party, it's objectionable to voters. That's the point about this. That's the point. We're representing the voters' will. Perhaps the great irony of the government's proposals is this. When they released their Green Paper in 2011, they found what was described, as I quote, as a small majority of people opposed to the government's proposal to lift the ban. And they still carried on. This government, which itself has a small majority, now seeks to overturn a small majority that they themselves reported. A former Liberal Democrat leader and a Conservative Secretary of State backed my 2006 ban, so did the chairman of the Richard Commission. I'll just quote from this and then allow my honourable friend in. Lord Richard chaired the Commission, which reported in 2004, recommending the extra powers for the Assembly which my 2006 Act delivered. He told the Welsh Affairs Committee, there's something wrong in a situation which 5 people can stand employed, none of them can be elected, and they then all get into the Assembly. On the face of it, that does not make sense. I think a lot of people in Wales find that it does not. The eminent Welsh academic, Dr. Dennis Balsam, said in his evidence to the Richard Commission, candidates use the list as an insurance against failing to win a constituency contest. This dual candidacy can also confuse the electorate, who may wish to consciously reject a particular candidate only to find them elected via the list. It should remain a basic democratic right not to elect a particular candidate or to be able to vote a member out.
Our own friend for giving way. And does he agree with me that the real objection to dual candidacy is that those individuals who are rejected by the electorate are then let in through the parties, through the back door, by the parties, not by the electorate themselves?
It's a closed list.
Expresses my argument very well, indeed better in some respects. One of the motivations for reversing the 2006 ban expressed by Plaid Cymru was the loss of their unquestionably talented Assembly member, Helen Mary Jones. While dual candidature was still permitted as Secretary of State for Wales on January the 9th, 2006, I received a press release from Helen Mary Jones in which she described herself as the Llanelli-based Assembly member. In it she complained about money spent on a hospital in Carmarthen instead of one in Llanelli. However, she should really have been supporting both hospitals. As the list Assembly member for Mid and West Wales, she represented both towns. If she had really been discharging her list member duties properly, she would not have discriminated between these two towns or their hospitals. Yet of all the parts of the list area which she represented, she targeted the one place where she'd been narrowly defeated in 2003, invariably describing herself, as I say, as the Llanelli-based Assembly member. But the 2006 Act stopped her describing herself as the Assembly member for Llanelli, although in the meantime she'd campaigned hard as the list member and had won the seat back in 2007, only to lose it again in 2011, and since the ban had kicked in by then, she no longer remained the list member. That has since made it much harder for her to win the seat back for the next elections in 2016. But now the pièce de résistance, Mr. Cho. If this bill... no, I'd like to finish this point, please. If this bill gets enacted, unamended, the Plaid Cymru Party leader, Leanne Wood, will be able to implement, and indeed quite possibly is already implementing, the comprehensive strategy she laid out in a remarkably candid memorandum in August 2003 when she was a list Assembly member, and my honourable friend has referred to that. He's quoted from it, and I therefore won't do so. It was issued privately to... Well, it's very... I will do so if the honourable members are disappointed. It was issued privately to key party colleagues, but even before the era of WikiLeaks, happily revealed to the rest of the nation in a generous act of democratic service. If this bill becomes law, she can put into practice her own painstakingly frank advice to her colleagues. She's currently, and has been since 2003, one of 4 listed members for the South Wales Central National Assembly for Wales electoral region. But on the 15th of March 2003, she announced plans to stand for the Rhondda constituency in the Assembly elections in May 2006. And in her press release, I have one here dated the 13th of November 2013, She modestly describes herself as the Rhondda-based Assembly member Leanne Wood. To be fair, she does live in the Rhondda, but actually her office is in the town of Pontypridd, which is located in the Pontypridd and not the Rhondda constituency. So she isn't actually the Rhondda-based Assembly member Leanne Wood. She is the Pontypridd-based Assembly member Leanne Wood. But never mind, we'll move on fast from that trifling matter of accuracy. She could also have chosen to describe herself as the Aberdare-based, or Cardiff-based, or Cowbridge-based, all places in her South Wales Central Regional constituency. But no, she's apparently uninterested in the concerns of those other parts of her regional constituency. By some amazing coincidence, she's only interested in the Rhondda because she always and only describes herself as Rhondda-based. When the leader of Plaid Cymru first said she would stand for the Rhondda, it sounded like a very brave, some might say a very foolhardy move. Then, of course, the Conservatives proposed to bring back dual candidacy, and she said it was likely she would also stand to retain her regional assembly member position on the list. Not so brave after all. When she loses in the Rhondda constituency in 2006, I'm afraid I have to break the news to her that she will lose heavily to the sitting Labour member, the admirable Leighton Andrews. Leanne Wood will have the lifeline of dual candidacy to fall back upon. No wonder Plaid Cymru are such enthusiastic little helpers to the government in this clause. We should rename the bill Leanne's Lifeline. I will give away.
Right, Honourable Gentleman, I've been listening carefully to his argument. I really don't understand this concept of the back door. Surely if, and I may be wrong, and members opposite will tell me, but surely if party candidates are listed on the ballot paper and members cast a vote in the regional ballot, which is a separate vote that they have, they do know the consequences of the vote they cast. So if someone is elected on that list, based on the second vote that somebody has cast, the voters know what's going to happen. I don't understand how you can describe that, the Honourable Gentleman can describe that, as being elected by the back door.
The Honourable Member is not a member for Wales, for a Welsh seat, but the truth is, people in Wales feel it is being elected by the back door when they turn down as their sitting constituency member, particularly individual, and they find them elected anyway. That seems to me to be a very valid description by the back door. I do want to make a bit of progress, if my honourable friend doesn't mind, because I just want to make a concluding series of points. But Mrs Jones or Mr Davis, living in Porth or Treherbert in the Rhondda constituency, should be forewarned by Leanne Woods' memorandum, which amounted to a charter for abusing their money as taxpayers. Don't bother to approach her for help, I would advise Mrs Jones or Mr Davis. Be advised to check first whether you fit into her game plan, because that plan is not about helping either of you, it's about helping her and her political party. She's extremely, some might say, recklessly honest about her real intentions. In her memorandum, she urged Plaid Cymru Assembly list members like herself only to do casework, not where it's needed, not how it might help you, Mrs Jones or Mr Davis, but where it might benefit Plaid Cymru in their target seats, now including the Rhondda. Only attend civic and other events in the constituency if you think that there are votes in it, Leanne Woods advised her colleagues. Your votes, Mrs Jones and Mr Davis. I'd check it all out first, if I were you. She urged Plaid Cymru Assembly list members to concentrate tens of thousands of pounds of their local Assembly office budgets in their party's target seats, like the Rhondda now. Leanne Woods' memorandum of August 2003 was entitled "What Should Be the Role of a Regional AM?" It made a perfect case for the ban on dual candidature in Wales, as my honourable friend, member for Pontypridd, has expressed by quoting in detail from it, which I won't do. Mr Chope, the government is shamelessly proceeding to enshrine again in statute in Clause 2 of this bill the very practice which this Parliament banned 8 years ago to prevent such abuses, of which there had been very many over the years. Yep.
Giving way, and he's making a brilliant and convincing argument against dual candidacy, as always. But does he agree that at the very least, changing this system back and forth, as the Electoral Reform Society has said in the past, risks undermining the kind of stability of the electoral system we have? Shouldn't we just stick with the system we already have?
I completely agree, and the change was made after evidence assembled for Parliament, and Parliament was convinced by that evidence. Mr. Chope, there's a simple question both supporters of this bill and critics of this Parliament's 2006 ban cannot answer, and it is this. If candidates cannot persuade voters to vote for them, why should they nevertheless be forced upon voters through the back door? The people of Wales are entitled to an answer, even if this government cannot give it to them, by ramming through this highly contentious, undemocratic and thoroughly objectionable clause in the bill, which otherwise, in its broad features, enjoys a fair degree of cross-party consensus. The fundamental point is that the Government of Wales Act 2006, by introducing the ban, put the voters back in charge. If voters did not want to elect somebody, they did not have to do so. If they reject a candidate, that candidate should not end up representing them. We should keep the voters in charge by rejecting Clause 2.